Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. The federal government has concluded plans to borrow 2 trillion naira from the current 10 trillion naira pension funds to finance the development of infrastructure. Now, the disclosure was made at the National Economic Council meeting presided over by the Vice President Yemi Osinbajo on Thursday. A briefing newsman at the end of the NEC meeting in Abuja, Kaduna State Governor El-Rufai stated that the decision of the federal government to pull 2 trillion naira out of the pension funds was reached by a NEC subcommittee. According to Governor El-Rufai, the country will never be able to address its road infrastructure deficit with the current budgetary allocation for road construction and maintenance. Joining us to speak on this and several other economic matters is economist Tope Fasua. Welcome to the morning show.
Good morning.
Good to have you.
Thank you for joining us.
Okay, where do we start from with the latest developments as far as the economy is concerned? Let's look at this issue of borrowing, and more borrowing. In the last number of years, the federal government has had to revert to the pension funds to help shore up, financing for infrastructure. Now this latest one, 2 trillion naira out of 10 trillion. No, what's your view about this?
Very interesting, though, but I don't know why they're spinning that information in that manner, because as at April last year, the information we had was they had taken 5.5 trillion out of about 7.9 trillion that we had then. Maybe there's been some accretion, to the pensions, and they're taking 2 trillion more. So if they do that, they're going to be taking about 7.5 trillion from a 10 trillion pension, which is over 70%. It's okay, but I'm a bit suspicious of why they're spinning it to look like all they're taking is 20% when it's actually 70%. So we have to be, first of all, I think that's what we need to attack. We need to.
They're taking 20% because the Pension Act does allow 20% of the pension funds to be
taken way more than 20%.
Yeah, but they're taking way more than that. I'm not sure it's up to 70%.
Well, just Googling. In fact, yesterday night I had to go back because I knew that information had come out. 5.5 trillion had been taken from that pension, and if they are taking more, then it's over 70%.
The official figures that I have say 72.5%
exactly.
of the funds
You know what I'm saying?
by the federal government.
72.5%. So I don't know why they're spinning it in that way, but it's a very interesting thing for people to try and explore exactly how much are we taking from this pension. How safe is it, for us to take so much from this pension? Because again, remember that we moved away from a guaranteed pension system to a contributive pension system. And that contributive pension system is basically that everybody that's entitled to a pension would have to pay up right now. So as you're working, they're taking the money from your account. Your organization is adding a bit of money to it. So it's people's money, all right? So we have to be extremely careful how we manage it so that people don't get stranded when they need their money. Because, again, this is money meant for vulnerable people. And, of course, we also know the kind of things that had happened with these pensions in the past where, we got a minor case going on. We got all sorts of people who have just dipped their hands into people's pensions and spent the money. We have so many scenarios. We have people who are still struggling. I know someone who left from one of these development banks recently, and for 2 years, they're still trying to access their pension. So the way we have actually related with that pension or with pensions in Nigeria has not been very encouraging. And so I think that it behooves on the people of this country to try and ensure that we safeguard as much as possible people's pensions. Even if it doesn't concern you directly, we all need to get involved, because these are people's sweat that have been saved up over the years. And so no government actually has a right to dip their hands beyond what the law says. And if you would, you have to also carry the people along properly and let them know what. However, in terms of financing infrastructure, yes, government will always be under pressure to finance infrastructure, whether we like it or not, and they have to find the money one way or the other. The alternative is We say they shouldn't do too much foreign borrowing because of exchange risks, for one. The fact that if we devalue the naira, that means we have to get a lot more naira to pay our foreign debt. And taking money from the pension account is also kind of a domestic borrowing, actually. So it's a choice. It sounds safe, to borrow locally because naira for naira, you have to, if when you are repaying, you have to repay the naira, even if you have to print and pay, whatever the case may be, So, so they have to. However, the problem is that our value for money in this country is so low because for every government spend, we probably get about 30% value for money. The corruption thing is still there. We have all sorts of, if not less, we have the corruption issue. We have all sorts of issues whereby, so if you're taking people's pension and you're saying that, okay, maybe 50% of that money is going to get lost because there are people who are going to do deals by the side and all of that, and the money goes into their pockets.
But those aren't our only options. Foreign borrowing and taking from the pension are not the only options. So what can the government do in order to provide infrastructure for the roads, for hospitals, for schools, and also ensure that the pensions are still maintained?
Exactly. Now, those are not the only options. The government also does issue bonds from time to time, and those ones are there. This year, I know the government, the people who run the economies, I think they want to move back to domestic borrowing this year. That's been there, I think that's what the Minister of Finance said.
Yes.
When Kemi Adeosun was around, you could see that she was actually saying, no, we need to move to foreign borrowing, right? And, well, the reason why she was saying that at that time also was because some of the local borrowing, bonds and so on that we had issued, some of them were paying 16, 17%.
Very high.
And that's, and again, it was the same foreigners who will come here and maybe through some of the local banks, get access to those bonds. And I mean, if you're making 17%, 16% on coupon alone, I mean, the yield was as high as 20%, everybody will do that all day. That's what they say in the city of London, the financial markets said, we will do it all day because the sovereign guarantee is there. Nigeria will always pay. It's a sovereign nation. And, so you take a position, government even assures you that you're going to get your dollar back when you're moving out at a certain rate. So you can just do your mathematics. They were making loads of money from here. So Kemi Adeosun believed that we should move to foreign borrowing. However, the risk, it's cheaper in terms of the rates. Maybe then we're talking about 7%, but there's an exchange risk there. And also, there are also political risks. For example, people were not going to be giving you money just looking at the rates. They were also going to be looking at, okay, what political advantage can they take of you? Okay, I want to put I want to put some of my troops on ground in your country, for example, like they talk about AFRICOM and all of that stuff. Then they get a lot of access to you. That's what comes with foreign borrowing. Apart from the fact that if the naira devalues, you suddenly find yourself in serious trouble.
And when you borrow, you're already, disadvantaged. And when you have all these other factors, thrown in, then it becomes a very serious. But let's even look at where this borrowing is intended to address: road, rail, and power. El-Rufai himself, the chair of that NEC committee, did say that 1.7 trillion or so, trillion had been thrown into the power sector.
Can you imagine?
In the last 3 years, and nothing to show for it. So what is the guarantee that with this 2 trillion naira,
we're the same
that
country.
this will actually fix the infrastructure problem, considering that the yearly budget for infrastructure this year, in 2020, is about 169 billion or so. And according to them, we will never fix infrastructure if we continue on this trajectory.
I have actually a long time ago taken that, to sort of outside the box thing, out of the box kind of thinking. If we're going to fix the railroads and power, look at that power. It's very embarrassing. We're the same country who we accused Obasanjo of spending $16 billion, within 8 years, and he didn't fix anything. Yarada came for a couple of years, spent a bit, Good luck, Jonathan also spent about $8 billion or something. This present government has actually gone haywire as well. And the funny thing, the other day, we heard the current minister blaming Fashola, his predecessor, who is still in the cabinet, and saying that they wasted so much money, and maybe through his aid or something, So, for how long are we going to go around all of this thing? Let me tell you, fundamentally what is wrong is the thinking around infrastructure. Now, let me tell you this. Like, people talk about other countries borrowed, all the big countries borrowed and all of that in order to get to where they get to. But the point is that most of their borrowings, number one, are domestic. You see, they raise a lot of war bonds, they raise a lot of domestic infrastructure bonds and so on in those countries that we talk about. That's what they did. So their own people financed their own development. Now, however, here we seem to be a little bit foreign focused. We believe, oh, the foreign investor is going to come. But not only that, where the real tragedy is that we also believe that, you know, the foreign investor will come, but we'll also bring the foreign knowledge in order to come and develop our country. It's never going to work. So for as long as we're focused on just the finance and we are not developing the technology ourselves, we're not developing the capacity ourselves, we're just going to be like throwing money into the Atlantic Ocean. In other words, what we're saying is that, you know, the power infrastructure, power sector, for example, I believe until I've always said, you know, until we get our universities to be involved, our polytechnics to be involved, we get those students at that level to do whatever it is they can on that local level so that we can fix rural infrastructure. The other day I had an issue with the Rural Electrification Agency. They came to Sura Market here to put some power thing there, and they were able to light up Sura.
Well, Mr. Fasua, it looks like it's time for a short break, but we're joining you right after the break.
Okay.
Stay with us.
Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the morning show. It's Arise News. Tope Fasua has been trying to help us understand federal government's plan to borrow an additional 2 trillion naira, you know, out of the pension funds of about 10 trillion. But let me help you with that point you were trying to make earlier. The borrowing will be done through bonds with private companies investing in road and rail to be paid, off in 20 years. So it's going to be, you know, largely private sector driven.
Well, you know, even if, well, of course, most of these transactions are private sector driven these days. But what is critical right now is you're taking money from people's pensions, right? Which you say that, and I heard someone say that, was it Erufai himself, that, oh, these are pensions of 30 years old people
yes,
who are still going to be around for a long time and all. However, fundamentally, an integrity issue that we're not talking about the 5.5 trillion that had already been taken. That's an integrity issue. Like, there's supposed to be full disclosure when you're doing some of these things. Because if you're spinning that news, someone even commented on the WhatsApp group, I believe, said, well, it's just 20%, you know. And I had to say no, because, you know, I'm a columnist, so like they say about you journalists and we journalists, right, that a journalist is a historian in a hurry.
That's right.
So you have a lot of information in your head. Things I said, no, this isn't quite kosher. Because I saw the news, I now went online and I saw it, 5.5 trillion had been taken April 2019.
And before that, 120 billion in 2016.
Perhaps, you know, so they keep on like accumulating. I remember when Fashola and Co. in their first comment in 2015 were actually attacking that issue of, look, these pension funds can't be sitting like this, can't be sitting. However, fine. It is true that we shouldn't have just funds sitting down when we have infrastructural issues. However, those monies belong to people.
Yes.
And if you see what pensioners have gone through in this country, or pensioners have gone through in this country over time, sometimes sleeping on the road, sometimes dying in the queue and all of that, someone would say, no, we shouldn't actually touch this money at all. But if I'm going to touch it, okay, fine. So it's going to be private sector driven, you know, maybe through a bond and all of that, backed by this pension is what they're saying. Yeah. So private sector companies are going to buy into it. It's backed by this pension, but then, of course, the money is gone. And however, the fact that it's private sector companies getting involved, it can only mitigate this issue of value for money that I spoke about earlier on. Again, the point I was trying to make earlier also is that when you look at factors of production, for example, I like to have that discussion. So you have the land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship thing.
Yes.
However, there are new factors of production like technology, like information, which nobody will teach you those ones in school, you know, but those like knowledge, you know, those are the new factors of production we're looking at. And so in this instance now, there's a way, if you look at the book written by Thomas Piketty and a few other people, they've been talking about the nexus between labor and capital, that people who have capital are able to buy technology like machines and robots and so on in order to reduce the labor that they have to employ. All right, so you can see capital taking out labor very massively. In the same vein, what we should then be looking at is how can we use the numbers that we have, the labor that we have, in order to reduce the capital that we borrow. In other words, takes you back to those cool things that I'm talking about. So if you were in UNN, for example, engineering department, electrical engineering, I don't see why students of year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5 are not doing joint projects in different villages around Nsukka and Co. All right, and lighting up those villages using solar, using mini grid, mini hydro, whatever kind you can do. Because then again, you'll be training yourselves and having something on your CVs. And you'll be experimenting and failing is part of success.
And by the time they get into the real world,
exactly, they'll have something, and that's how, by the time you're able to begin to solve some problems at that local level, then the government can face the big issue. So it's not about investing massively in Mambila or something. We like these massive projects which we are never able to handle. And you can see what has happened. I've been seeing a lot of reviews around that. Look, the power sector itself has collapsed already. From people who are supposed to know, even from government officials. So with all this investment, 1.7 trillion gone down the drain. Again, there's been shutdowns, blackouts, and all of that, rolling blackouts all over the country. So we are thinking, I think that strategy needs to be relooked at.
So what do you have to say to PENCOM's statement that states the risk-based examination approach was implemented as a way of promoting transparency?
They're just backing up. Wait until someone else takes over at PENCOM someday, and then they tell you that, oh, we shouldn't have given that money. That's what we see in this country. So, I mean, they're just sticking what they call that's the toe in the party line. So, because government has made up their mind to take 2 trillion from that, so Madam PENCOM find a story to back it up. And she backs it up, but you see, that's why some of us are there, so at least we can have an independent review of what's going on. There's nothing too wrong about that, but we need to be extremely careful. But I'm also picking them up on the integrity issue because 5.5 trillion had been taken from these pensions earlier on.
But I'm even wondering, I mean, how much of, some people would say, look, this is just a drop in the ocean, considering McKinsey's report that says Nigeria actually needs about $31 billion.
Mind you, Ngozi, that, again, what I've said, so Nigeria needs $31 billion, right, if you were looking for capital only. But what do you have? You have boots on ground. You have human beings. You have young people who are ready to go. They are refusing to allow the young people of this country to build this country. So in the alternative, if you're not talking to the young people and say, guys, what experiment can we perform in this area and all that? We talked about, electricity and people in electrical engineering. I go to a lot of cities, and you see all those small street roads, all of them dug up, all of them abandoned. What if students of Yaba Tech, a civil engineering in Yaba Tech, if they take roads in Shomolu, all of those abandoned places, and say, okay, this is our project this year, 20 of them are working on it. You can even say, okay, Julius Berger, you know what, for you to get that contract, which, we're trying to do this road from Lagos to Abidjan. Okay, so in order for you to do that, you have to mentor students in 20 universities in some of your projects.
And not just use their pension money.
Exactly. So in that way, we're now substituting. We're substituting what we have. There's a fundamental way, we're not getting this right in terms of we don't even know what our strengths are. We don't know what our resources are. We're abandoning our strength. When you go and give a Chinese company this, Chinese people will go and bring their own people. Do you know what? That's what's happening. 1.4 billion people they have to take care of. So they encourage them to come to Africa. If you went to Ethiopia Airport, Addis Ababa Airport, you see that most of the time, 40% of those who are passing through that airport are Chinese people going to different places in Africa. And when they finish the project, they never fully leave. So here we are. We don't even know what our strengths are. We leave our students to come out of university, then they start to roam around because the big men are only interested in taking care of their own children. We have 13.5 million children roaming the street. Young people, young, brilliant minds that should be, it's a crime against humanity. Yes, it's a crime against humanity. But the point is, that is your capital. That is your capital. That is your money. Those children that are carrying bowls up and down is Nigeria's money. And you know what? That they are worth a lot more than $31 billion. Those children, when you leave them, they carry bowls up and down. They become keke drivers. They become Okada drivers and all of that. You've messed up your country. You've mortgaged 2 lifetimes. And that's why I ran for president. Even though you guys didn't listen to me. But it's fine. But that's what it is.
Well, I recall, I moderated that, presidential debate. And what a brilliant, outing that was.
It was great,
But then
thank you.
again, it only makes you ask the question as to, really, are we really ready to move forward as a nation?
I
Not
don't
just
think
paying
so. Because
lip service.
You see, let me tell you, some of those countries we talk about, they went through a lot of stress. We make it look like, they just got it, maybe by prayers, it was a walk in the park. People died. Sometimes I look at some of those pictures when they were building Manhattan, and people will see it on those beams on the 100th floor. A lot of them fell and died. You know what I'm saying? And some of them were interred in the cement and all of that. It was hard work. It was a lot of backbreaking work. Are we ready for that? No. Our mindset doesn't show that we're ready for that kind of, hard stuff. Because, hey, if we believe that all it takes, we travel around the world, we're having all those meetings, we're signing all those MOUs, and the white man is going to come or the Chinese man is going to come and build your country, it will never happen. If it does, they're going to take their pound of flesh back end, and that's the way it works.
Let's talk about Nigeria for a second. Let's come back home to the Central Bank of Nigeria, where the cash reserves ratio has been increased from 22.5% to 27.5% in order to stem inflation. What is your take on that?
Right, the monetary policy instruments are quite limited, and sometimes you tend to shoot all your bullets and then you're left with nothing. So the central bank is left with a few things, maybe talking about the CRR, cash reserve ratio, the liquidity ratio, talking about trying to target inflation targeting, and so on. I have always had the opinion, I'm still of the opinion that we shouldn't actually be targeting inflation that much. We should be targeting growth. If you're growing at 2.1%, all right, and we are projected to grow at 3% this year, and inflation is at 11.8%. The risk you run is this, that if you target inflation, you're going to also slow down growth. So if you slow down growth maybe to 2% or 1.5%, and you're trying to bring inflation from 11.8% to, let's say, 9%, and it's, we've achieved. But net on net, you have negative growth because you should back off that inflation growth from the GDP growth that you have. So I would say that we should target, I've always said, let's target double-digit GDP growth, all right? That's what African countries should be doing. Let me tell you what, recently the echo problem came up when Ouattara and Macron, they signed something, and then they said that they are kind of hijacking the echo. I think that they should take them up on that. But, I now went to, because that echo...
The Anglophone,
yes.
West Africa is...
They were included. So these Francophone... Yes, I went and checked up on the Francophone countries. There's supposed to be a convergence criteria, and one of it is that inflation should be a single digit. Most of them have 1% inflation, these Francophone countries. But to what effect? Are they growing? You can't even compare most of those economies, all of them put together, to Nigeria. Because, you see, African countries need to be growing. At this level, China was growing at 18% at some point in time. United States economy grew at 15%, sometimes in the 60s, 15% year on year. And here we are. What are we doing with 3% or 2% growth? No. Why are we targeting inflation? However, the CBN is doing what it can do because the real issue is with the fiscal sector and with the general visioning for Nigeria, part of this out-of-the-box thing that I'm talking about.
It's similar to what the Finance Minister Zainab Ahmed was saying, that Nigeria has a debt problem, does not have a debt problem, rather has a revenue problem.
So I'll tell you what, I wrote an article back to her, I don't know if she read it, but Nigeria has a debt problem, Nigeria has a revenue problem, Nigeria has an expenditure problem. Because again, here we are talking about 37 billion renovation in House of Assembly, National Assembly. You have an expenditure problem.
All right, we'll put you on hold. Yes. Okay.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time. We can talk to you all day.
Yes, seriously. I like to be given the field sometimes.
Discussion.